let's get into the news. January 6th was bad, okay? As communicated by our fearless leaders yesterday on January the 6th, the first anniversary, we had Kamala Harris and her partner in crime, Joe Biden, give a speech. Actually, each of them gave their own comments and speeches. Kamala basically compared January 6th to Pearl Harbor and to 9/11, in which thousands and thousands of people lost their lives. She even tears up a little bit during the speech. She gives some level of crocodile tears. Oscar, level, performance in terms of her grievances there. And then Joe Biden kind of gave a similar speech, a much angrier and sort of tone one. Kamala's was a bit more almost lamenting in tone, right? But Biden's was much more scathing and kind of bitter and grumpy and angry. And then there was actually a memorial or kind of a vigil actually in front of the Capitol yesterday as well. And in Biden's speech, he actually makes a heck of a statement, which is this wasn't a group of tourists. This was an armed insurrection. And I'll just remind the public and myself that one person was shot on January 6th. It was actually a Trump supporter, not a police officer. No one, to my knowledge, has been caught with a weapon, particularly with a firearm, during that particular day, outside of the police, of course. And in addition to that, the DOJ has yet to charge anybody with insurrection or with domestic, T-cellism, if you know what I mean. And yet we have the POTUS engaging in revisionist history and calling January 6th an armed insurrection. And unfortunately, that there's an old African proverb, history is written by the victor. And so in this case, it's just a matter of time before this becomes common knowledge and sort of, described in our history books as being on the same level as Pearl Harbor and 9/11, no less. Absolutely atrocious and disrespectful comparisons. Meant to increase enmity, not decrease enmity. And I think this definitely belongs into the S tier category. This stoking of division, this hatred in terms of rhetoric and divisiveness, and this ability to really recreate both the past and the present in real time. For the past year or so, using this as really a tool by which to beat and bully their political opponents, roughly half the country. And this has been part of the course for everybody: the mainstream media, political leadership, and even corporations to a pretty large extent. So S tier in terms of that. Definitely some scary language that people are brainwashed in this manner. Disregard the election of Donald Trump and all the violence that ensued. Forget about the so-called protests of BLM and when Kavanaugh was being nominated to the Supreme Court. None of these things matter to these people. Forget about all those incidents that resulted in violence, arson, in some cases, injury and loss of life. The only thing that matters is the one that's politically expedient for them. And so they'll harp on this until the end of time and then use it as a justification to do whatever they want. This is a carte blanche, right? Voting Rights Act. Oh, we need to pass this, right? Which is really federalization of elections at the national level, so they can have their way. Any crisis is a good excuse, and so they'll use this to full effect and continue to do so to this day. But I think that there's a level in which folks are starting to, not really like it. I mean, you can only talk about how bad everyone else is for so long before you look like a monster, right? And I think that maybe people are slowly catching on to that. Biden's disapproval rating is in the gutter, continues to get lower almost by the day, really by the week. And so people are really upset and disappointed with him. He doesn't have the this pandemic under control. He said that he would, shut down the virus and not shut down the country. That is proven to be completely and utterly false, with no clear end in sight for these forever pandemics. So next story I'm going to talk about here is Emmanuel Macron. So he says that he wants to, quote, piss off the unvaccinated until they submit, but he wouldn't jail or forcibly vaccinate them. And, all of these world leaders, especially, these major countries, they coordinate closely. This isn't a unique, point of view shared by France, by Macron. In fact, you have in, other parts of the world, let's say the Philippines, Duterte threatening unvaccinated people with arrest, right? So this just happened. In addition to that, you have in Australia, police basically throwing folks into, let's say, quarantine camps and detention centers or whatever they're calling it, to the point that, they arrested 3 people who broke out of the Koof quarantine camp in the middle of the night and were rearrested. So just an absolute disaster. I think that he makes some really scathing comments here. Said, hey, I don't want to piss off the French people, but for the unvaccinated, I really want to piss them off. We'll continue to do this. This is the strategy. In a democracy, the worst enemies are lies and stupidity. We'll pressure them by limiting them as much as possible. And so come January 15th, they can't go to get a coffee, go to a restaurant, go to the theaters. They can't do a lot of things that free people can do. He even goes so far as to say, hey, when my freedom threatens those of others, I become someone irresponsible. And someone irresponsible is not a citizen. I mean, by that logic, I mean, if one spits gum on the ground, is that not irresponsible? Do you suddenly lose your citizenship? Just absolute, just a trash bag of a human being, and crazy, polarizing commentary by the French president. And definitely kind of let's say an escalation in terms of rhetoric on his side, and really it's only a matter of time, right? So he's saying, hey, we won't jail the unvaccinated or forcibly vaccinate them, but we're seeing this in other parts of the world, both threatened and actual. And so it becomes one of those things where it's just a matter of time before this gets worse and worse. And this forever pandemic allows those in authority to demonize, dehumanize, and in this case, let's say de-citizenize, if that's a word, revoke the citizenship rights, at least proverbially, of those in his own country, right? So absolute shame. I think that I'm going to move this one up to an S tier. It's par the course for what we've been seeing and what we are seeing, but I don't want to normalize this as if it's some like not top priority area. Joe Biden has similarly used a fear tactic, right? Jobber jab to push his agenda, knowing full well that what he's doing was immoral or at least unconstitutional. He even admitted as such when he conceded recently that there is no federal solution to the pandemic. It doesn't matter, right? Do it anyway. Get away with it for as long as you can in order to push your crazy leftist agenda on the country. And it's crazy, too, how the goalposts continue to move, right, with this entire thing. So, initially, I think his goal, Biden's goal was 70% of the country, the U.S. country, should be vaccinated. Then they reached that goal, according to a White House memo. And now he's, announcing a new goal, or he announced a new goal in the fall, 70% of the world's population within a year, right? And then, what happens after that? Okay, maybe 90%, maybe 99%, maybe 100%. So now the freedom of Americans is dependent on, what folks in Zimbabwe are doing, right? What Venezuela is doing with their bodies. So now we have this moving target that is it's designed to stay locked down, in my opinion, for as long as possible, with no thought or appreciation for people's welfare. Repercussions be damned. So that's the reason that it belongs in the S tier category. More authoritarianism from our political elites. Next story is a little bit more localized, if you would, which is Gettr. which has been making the rounds recently, and I've been covering it myself. It's an interesting story because what happened was there's a so-called America First streamer, Mr. Fuentes, who was permanently banned last month from Gettr. I don't know his work very well, whether or not he's a good or bad person. That's a secondary situation. But what was somewhat enlightening is a reporter with the Blaze, Elijah Schaefer, he inquired about the nature of the ban, and his belief is, even though Gettr basically said that he violated their terms of service, they wouldn't say what in the terms of service he actually violated. Implying that it wasn't about what he did on the platform, but rather what he did off the platform that caused the ban, which is kind of a different precedent now and pretty startling in terms of technology and social media precedents, very similar to our kind of current big tech situation where, one can get booted off a platform for things that they did not do on the platform simply because of perception, right, or affiliation. Which is kind of a scary precedent. They then went further and shadow banned Elijah Schaefer himself on the platform. And this was verified by another user, Jack Hatfield, even though Jason Miller of Gettr was like, we don't do that. Jack Hatfield could not find Elijah Schaefer on the platform, or at least he had a lot of trouble doing so, implying that he was shadow banned. So not a good look for this new hot social media platform. It then goes even further, right? So there's an interesting related story, which is Ebony Bowden, who's the global communications director for Gettr. She was found out, and this is compliments of National File, to basically be a super anti-Trumpster, basically as vile as they come, or at least as hateful as they come. So, going in on Trump's claims about the election, calling them baseless and unfounded, condemning the January 6th protesters / rioters, basically condemning Trump back in 2018 at his behavior at the G7 summit, calling it genuinely frightening, said the U.S. was careening towards disaster. She then praised her meeting with Clinton in New York as a life highlight, saying she had the opportunity to thank her for everything. So this person seems to be a fairly hard lefty, and yet she's running global communications for this startup or this young company, Gettr, that's pretty strongly affiliated with the right, and claims to be freedom of speech. But there seems to be some underpinnings here that are concerning. And so something to watch out for. I'm going to move this one to a C tier though. I'm tempted to put it higher, but I have to leave it at C simply because there's no better alternative that I'm aware of. I mean, you have Twitter, you have a couple of startup-y, companies, maybe a Gab. But in the absence of, Twitter being a credible option for a lot of people now that they've been booted from the platform and et cetera, despite these violations, Gettr would need, 100 times this, right, over the next, couple of years to really sour its reputation. But in the meantime, the alternative is so bad. There's really no other strong option out there with the amount of, users and growth that they've experienced. And so a little less material now, still in the early stages. We'll see how this pattern develops, if it does at all. So next up, we have to talk about Novak Djokovic, who has refused entry into Australia over his vaccine status. And particularly, so the story goes, he had gotten a vaccine exemption through the state of Victoria in Australia. And he was all set, clear to participate in the upcoming Australian Open. But then, kind of at the last minute, the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, basically says, hey, his visa has been canceled. You're not special just because you're rich or famous or a famous sports athlete or even the reigning champion of the Australian Open. We need proof that you basically need a medical exemption. We need proof, I say. in the absence of which, we're going to detain you. We're going to arrest you. And that's exactly what they did. Last I checked, Djokovic, his parents and his lawyers were working on getting something done so that he can actually play. He did not immediately leave the country. His team filed a challenge on Thursday. So we'll see how this goes. More tyranny. I think there's a trend right now on Twitter that Australia has fallen, but just really, really disappointing stuff. Here you have the reigning champion, top of the world, right? I remember when it was Federer and Rafael Nadal many years ago, and I was like, wow, that was great. And then this young upstart came and started, crushing the competition, and it now sits at the very top of the tennis world. The Michael Jordan of tennis in terms of this time. And he can't play in the sport after being formally cleared to play and receiving, right, the medical exemption. Just absolute medical tyranny is happening here. Absolute disgrace to watch. He has a lot of support from those who like him and support him, and so they're protesting and making their voices heard right now. And this is something to definitely watch. I'm gonna move this to the A tier, because I think that a lot of normal people, traditional people who are not online all the time, people who just like to live their lives and love their sacred sports, right? Their sacred pastimes, right? They love and respect the game of tennis and want it to be played. This is ruining the entire Australian Open for everybody, right? If he is deemed that he cannot participate. And millions of fans all around the world, including myself, would love to see him play. And so it's just going to the absurdity, right, of the entire situation. So tragic, and we'll continue to monitor and see how that develops. Last story for today, which is this one, Nassau County. There's a kind of a political executive here who signed an order defying Governor Kathy Hochul's mask mandate. He calls it an autocracy. So really, strong action really by this sort of new county executive of Nassau County, which is in New York State. And it's not even a small county. It's over 1 million people. And so he signed 3 executive orders on Thursday. One to give Nassau school boards the ability to scrap student mask mandates. Very interesting. It obviously was not well received by Kathy Hochul in her office. They're contesting it, saying it's doomed to fail, and we'll see what comes of it. The New York State Teachers Union, not surprisingly, I'm sure it's an extension of the Democratic Party, is also in opposition. So this actually reminds me of kind of an inverse situation, if you would, that happened not too long ago, which is in the state of Texas. In early 2021, Texas lifted its mask mandate, and Austin said, "Wait, no, it's still in force here in Austin." And so Texas AG Kim Paxton sued Austin and said, you need to get rid of that mask mandate. And a judge actually allowed Austin to keep his mask mandate in place. So now we're seeing kind of the opposite situation here, right? Where the governor decrees, thou shall have a mask mandate. And then the county exec says, no, it's up to you, individual choice. And we'll see what the judge has to say about this one, when it actually does go to court and gets resolved. But definitely a fascinating situation, first of its kind along these lines, these political lines, that I've seen, or to my knowledge. And one wonders what happens if the parties involved do not obey the judge's orders, right? What happens if you're a sheriff or a policeman, and the county executive says one thing, the governor says something else? Who do you follow? This is where things can get messy, right? And if we see more of this happening across the country, it can get pretty ugly potentially. So something to monitor for sure. Obviously, affecting over a million people's lives, and really escalating the culture war between tyranny and sort of business as usual, forever pandemics, and freedom, individual choice, individual responsibility. All right. And by the way, this guy is increasing the access to testing. So, he's not completely standing down here. He's just allowing for flexibility. Is what he's doing. So I'm going to move this to an A tier as well. I think this is a big deal. Nassau County, part of Long Island, and certain things may be a bellwether of what's to come. Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.